frequency, where the veil between this world and the next grows thin, and the things that whisper in the dark are given voice. From the cryptic candlelit studios, deep in the Indiana forests, your host, Matt Wilson, and his spectral producer, Juniper Ravenwood, unearth the forbidden, the forgotten, and the fearsome. So, still your heart, dim the light, and listen closely. For once you tune into the shadow frequency, you may never tune out.
All right, Matt, opening the file cabinets. Let's see here. First thing out tonight, a baby shoe with a hospital tag still attached.
That's already bad.
Yeah, it gets worse. The hospital was demolished decades ago.
Yeah, go ahead and set that directly into the nope pile.
All right, let's see what else we got here. Now I got a map of Indiana. One road highlighted in red.
Oh yeah, what does it say?
After midnight only.
That's not directions, that's a threat.
Okay, back it goes. And here's a sealed jar of pennies.
And why is that creepy?
Well, because every single one of them seems to be dated 1 year from now.
Okay, yeah, I hate that.
Oh, this stuff. Here it is, tonight's case file.
All right, let's open it up.
Episode 308, The Lafayette Vampire.
A grave, a legend, and a story that's lingered in the dark for generations. Tonight, we're heading into one of Colorado's strangest and most unsettling local mysteries. This is episode 308, The Lafayette Vampire.
You are tuned to the shadow frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. Hosted by Matt Wilson, produced by Juniper Ravenwood, with Chris Beach. The darkness continues.
Tonight's file feels cold. I opened the cabinet, and right on top was a blackened coin, like it had been pressed into damp soil for 100 years. Under that was a cemetery flower, flattened between two scraps of paper. And tucked all the way in the back was a cracked little tag with one word scratched across it in fading letters, Transylvania. Now, usually, if you hear that word, you picture ruined stone, moonlight on castle towers, maybe some poor soul making very bad choices in a horse-drawn carriage. But this case didn't happen in some faraway mountain pass. It happened in Lafayette, Colorado, a cold town, a cemetery, a rough grave marker, a dead miner from Transylvania, and over time, a story so strange that people began to whisper Colorado had its own vampire buried under a slab of concrete on the Front Range. What do you two make of that?
I live a case like this because it sounds impossible straight away. Colorado and vampires do not feel like they belong in the same sentence. And yet, here we are.
Yeah, that's properly unsettling, isn't it? You expect a vampire to turn up in a crumbling castle, not near a mining town and a rec centre. That makes it feel worse somehow. Too ordinary. Too close.
Exactly. That's what makes this one stick. It isn't grand and gothic at first glance. It's humble, almost plain, which somehow gives it more bite. A lonely grave in an American cemetery, and a legend that kept feeding long after the man beneath it was gone.
And once a place gets a reputation like that, every tree root, every shadow, every little offering left behind starts to feel like part of the evidence.
Tonight, we're opening the file on a Romanian miner named Teodor Glava, the grave marker that tied him to Transylvania, and the dark little legend that turned him into the Lafayette Vampire. Matt, go ahead and crack that file open.
Thanks for digging into the file cabinet and pulling out something that feels like it should have stayed buried. So picture it with me. Lafayette Cemetery. East Boulder County. Open sky. Colorado air. Grass moving a little in the breeze. And then, right there among the ordinary dead, is a grave people still seek out, because they're convinced something about it is not ordinary at all. It isn't some grand monument. It's a rough, flat, concrete marker. Weathered. Misspelled in places. Shared by two men. And yet, one side of that slab has pulled more superstition and dread onto itself than graves 10 times more dramatic ever managed. Visitors still leave things there. Coins, trinkets, flowers, notes, little tokens like they're paying respect, or making peace, or maybe making sure whatever is there stays satisfied. There's a tree near the plot, tall and stubborn, and that tree is one of the reasons the legend never really dies. Because the story says that after Teodor Glava was buried, people in town began to fear that the man from Transylvania wasn't truly dead at all. They whispered that something in him had crossed the ocean intact. Something hungry, something patient, and then the tale gets darker. The legend says townspeople opened the grave back up. They found blood at the mouth, teeth that looked too long, nails that seemed to keep growing, and that was enough for them. They drove a wooden stake into him and forced him back into the earth. The tree, they say, rose from that stake. In some versions, roses sprang from him too. In others, his shadow still circles the grave at night, and people standing too close feel a sudden heaviness, like the place itself is watching them. Those are the kinds of details that make a story stop sounding like folklore and start sounding like a warning. What gets me is how perfectly this legend fits the grave. The marker itself almost feels like an invitation to myth. It's not polished. It's not precise. It looks handmade, improvised, rough around the edges, like memory was trying to set itself in stone before memory could fade. On it is the name Teodor Glava and the birthplace that changed everything, Transylvania. That one word is like a fuse. You can almost hear the imagination catch fire the second somebody read it. And I've got something here in the file that makes that jump from legend to person feel very real. It's a photocopy of Teodor Glava's 1918 draft registration card. You can see the registrar's version of his name, and then beneath that, his own signature, Teodor Glava. Not Count Dracula, not some caped figure out of a penny dreadful, just a man putting his name down in ink, like millions of other men in that era. Records tied to local history research say he was born in 1877, worked at the Simpson coal mine, lived in Canfield west of Erie, died on December 3, 1918, and was buried on December 6. But once you know that, the legend almost gets creepier, not less. Because this wasn't a nobleman in a stone tower. This was a laborer, a man who crossed the world, ended up in the coal country of Colorado, and then died far from home. He shares that concrete slab with another Romanian miner, John Trandafir, another man tied to the same patch of earth and the same hard life. Even the grave itself feels like two stories layered on top of each other, one historical, one haunted. And if you were a kid in Lafayette hearing whispers about a man from Transylvania under a strange marker with a tree rising nearby, I can absolutely see how that grave would become the place you dared your friends to visit. Because once a town gives a grave a name like that, it changes the whole landscape around it. Now it isn't just a cemetery, it's a boundary line. Now that concrete slab isn't just a marker, it's a lid. Now that tree isn't just a tree, it's a nail keeping something pinned down. And the more people repeat that version, the more the place itself begins to participate. The wind sounds different. The shadows look longer. Coins left by visitors stop feeling like decorations and start feeling like offerings. You can stand in daylight and still feel that little primitive part of your mind saying, "Don't linger here too long." That is the heart of the Lafayette Vampire legend to me. Not that it happened in Transylvania, but that it didn't. It happened here. In a mining town in Colorado. In a municipal cemetery. In a place close enough to modern roads and neighborhoods that you can almost forget you're standing over a story people have spent decades feeding with fear. And yet the second you focus on that grave, you feel it. The old world creeping into the new one. The frontier picking up a curse it never asked for. Maybe that's why this story has lasted, because it doesn't need a huge stage. It just needs that slab, that tree, that name, and the possibility that when Teodor Glava was put in the ground, something else was buried with him only halfway. And if that's true, then maybe all those coins and flowers people leave behind aren't souvenirs at all. Maybe they're apologies. Whatever happened at that grave, it left a mark deeper than concrete.
That is the kind of story that makes a cemetery feel like it has a pulse.
Yeah, and I don't care how sunny it is outside, I still wouldn't fancy being the one standing there after dark.
In the second half, we go deeper into the man under the legend, the strange history around the marker, and whether the grave is hiding a vampire, a tragedy, or something even sadder. Juniper, take us into the break.
So far, we've got a lonely grave, a tree that may or may not be keeping something pinned to the earth, and a Colorado legend that refuses to stay in the ground. I'm guessing some of you are already deciding whether you'd visit that cemetery in daylight only or not at all. Chris, what do you make of it?
Cheers, Juniper. I'll say this, that grave has got a proper eerie pull to it. It feels like the sort of place where you go in for a quick look and end up backing away a bit faster than you meant to. And while you're with us, please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, because that really does help the algorithms. Follow us on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast directories. Head over to shadowfrequencypodcast.com for every episode, the companion blog, merch, show notes, and links to all the platforms. You can also support the show by buying us a coffee on the website and send us an email or a voice message there that might end up on a future episode. Right then, back to Juniper.
Let's see what the static coughs up tonight. Ah, there we go. A little signal just drifted out of the ether, wrapped in dust and radio hiss.
Message retrieved from the void.
Let's unseal it carefully and see what our listeners sent in from the other side of the inbox. This one comes from Bruce in Nevada. Hey Matt, Juniper, and Chris. I usually listen to the show late at night out here in Nevada, when I'm out in the garage tinkering with old tools and trying to avoid looking too hard into the dark beyond the driveway. There's just something about your show and an open desert night that go together. I listen on Pandora most of the time, and my favorite episodes are the ones about UFOs, hauntings, and weird conspiracy stuff that makes you sit there for a minute afterward and rethink everything. I really like how you make it feel creepy without overdoing it. Keep the shadows talking. Bruce from Nevada. Bruce, that is an absolutely perfect setting for this show. Garage light on, desert dark just beyond it, and shadow frequency rolling through the speakers. That feels like asking the universe to lean a little closer. And again, if you want to reach us, the email is shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. Matt, let's hand this strange little file back over to you.
You are tuned to the Shadow Frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. The darkness continues.
Thanks, Juniper. And Bruce, that email sounds like the opening shot of a horror film. So, naturally, I approve. Now, if the first half of this case is the legend breathing down your neck, the second half is where we lift the lid and see what history can actually tell us. And I'm pulling another item from the file here. A photocopy of research notes drawn from Teodor Glava's estate record trail. This is the kind of thing I love, because it isn't flashy. It's just paperwork. But sometimes paperwork is where a ghost story gets its sharpest edges. According to local history research, Glava had no relatives in Colorado, had been sick for about 2 weeks before he died, was embalmed, and was buried in Lafayette Cemetery after his death in early December 1918. The same research says his wife Sophia and daughter Victoria were back in Romania. And that changes the emotional temperature of the whole story, doesn't it? Because suddenly, the Lafayette Vampire isn't just a creepy tale. It's also the story of a man who died far from home during one of the ugliest disease outbreaks of the early 20th century. In Lafayette's coal country, influenza was tearing through the community in late 1918. The town quarantined. People got sick in waves. Death notices stacked up. Even in local retrospective reporting, Teodor Glava is remembered as one of the miners claimed by that outbreak. Now here's the one place in tonight's file where I have to let a little daylight in. Local historians who've dug into this case say there's no period record showing that townspeople officially dug Glava up. No city record authorizing any exhumation. And no newspaper evidence of a full-blown vampire panic in 1918. Their running theory is that the myth took shape later, quote, probably mid-century, when vampire pop culture was back in fashion and local kids were hearing spooky warnings about the grave of the man from Transylvania. In other words, the legend may have grown long after the burial itself. But here's why that doesn't kill the story for me. Sometimes the absence of proof doesn't make a legend weaker. It makes it eerier. It means the monster wasn't born in one explosive moment everybody could point to. It formed slowly, quietly, word by word, parent to child, teenager to teenager, story to story. A grave doesn't become charged overnight unless something in the town is ready for it. And in this case, all the ingredients were there. An immigrant laborer, a hard mining town, a pandemic, a cemetery section associated with the poor, and that one fatal word on the marker, Transylvania. There's another layer, too. That grave marker itself is strange enough to keep the legend alive without any help. Research from Lafayette history suggests the slab was likely made by George Lazar, a friend of John Trandafier's, and that its rough lettering and permanent concrete form are unusual for that section of the cemetery. The scratchings are misspelled, handmade, imperfect, which somehow makes the thing feel more intimate and more uncanny at the same time. It looks less like an official headstone and more like somebody refused to let these men vanish without a mark. And that to me is where the haunting really starts. Because if Glava had no close family in Colorado, then there was nobody here with the power to protect his memory. Nobody to step in generations later and say, no, that's not who he was. No grandson to laugh the rumor away. No daughter nearby to correct the story. Just a grave, a region name associated with vampires, and a town ready to turn loneliness into folklore. Westward's reporting quotes Lafayette historians making almost that exact point. When no one is left nearby to defend a person's real story, myth can move in and furnish the room. And yet, for all that, people still approach the grave like it holds a charge. They leave coins, trinkets, flowers, tiny acts of recognition. Maybe fear. Maybe affection. Maybe a strange kind of respect for a legend that has become bigger than fact. And if you stand there long enough, I think the case stops being a simple question of whether Teodor Glava was a vampire. That's almost too easy. The deeper question is why this grave still works on people. Why this one? Why not a dozen others? From the same cemetery, the same year, the same influenza wave. I think it's because the legend sits at the exact point where history and imagination overlap so tightly you can't fully separate them. A real miner, a real death, a real grave, a real tree, a real inscription tied to Transylvania. Then all around it, the human need to explain, dramatize, and maybe even ritualize death until it becomes something the living can carry. So no, I can't tell you tonight that Teodor Glava rose from the grave. But I can tell you this, a century later, people still go to that plot like they expect an answer back. And maybe that's what a vampire really is in a place like Lafayette. Not just a thing with fangs. A story that never stops feeding. Some graves hold bodies. Some hold legends. And a few, somehow, keep both.
That's the bit that gets me. Even if the tale grew later, the place still seems to have teeth. People don't keep leaving offerings at an ordinary grave for no reason.
That is such a sad and eerie thought that a man can disappear into history and come back as something people fear.
And that may be the final chill in this case. Whether Teodor Glava was ever feared in life almost matters less than the fact that in death, he became unforgettable. Juniper, take us home.
Tonight, we opened the file on the Lafayette Vampire, a rough grave marker in Colorado, a dead miner from Transylvania, a tree that may have become part of the legend, and a story that kept growing long after the burial was over. Thanks for joining us in the shadows tonight. If you want to reach out, email us at shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. You can also find us at shadowfrequencypodcast.com for episodes, show notes, the companion blog, merch, and links to all the places you can listen. And be sure to follow along on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Rumble. You guys want to say good night?
Good night, everybody. And if you find yourself in a cemetery reading old names after dark, maybe don't read them out loud.
Good night, all, and maybe leave the vampire a coin, just in case.
Sleep light, stay strange, and we'll see you next time when we open another file from the dark.
This episode was conjured with a solemn vow to explore the unexplained while remaining bound to the truths that have been unearthed. All interpretations are speculative and offered only for your enlightenment.